Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. I know it is so hard to believe, but we are to our last video for the whole semester. Yay! All right. We are taking a look at the hormones that are controlling the female body type, and notice that a lot of these hormones are the same as the male body type, because remember, we are all the same. We have all the same parts, but we're also all a little bit different, right? So that's super cool. All right, so let's take a look first at our gonadotropin releasing hormone, or our GnRH. We should be firmly grounded now that this is being released by the hypothalamus, that this is targeting the adenohypophysis, and this is going to trigger the release of FSH and LH. When we talk about the FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, this then is released by the adenohypophysis. This is going to target the follicles in the ovary, and this is going to trigger maturation. And I'm going to say from a primary follicle, and then like arrow, 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 to a single Graafian follicle. So that single winner. You might also remind yourself here that inside the follicle, you have the primary oocyte, which is going through meiosis 1, finishing to form a secondary oocyte, and then starting meiosis 2, and then of course it's released. That winner is released as a secondary oocyte frozen in metaphase 1. Frozen in metaphase 2. Thank you. Okay, and then we get to the estrogen. Estrogen is going to be released by that winner, the Graafian follicle. And it's going to really talk to the adenohypophysis. And it's going to trigger a spike in LH. And going back to target tissue, I'm just going to say widespread. And I think that's what made me kind of pause there for just a minute. Estrogen is one of those hormones that's really involved in our secondary sex characteristics. And so we're seeing it talk to our bone and get that faster epiphyseal closure that happens, causing female body types to typically be shorter than male body types. We're seeing the estrogen involved in a little bit of breast development every cycle. So that's causing a difference in fat distribution in the breast tissue, but in the buttocks and hip area as well. We're seeing we're seeing all of those. Let's go ahead and list like secondary sex characteristics. We need to make sure we have spike in LH listed. And then we're also going to see this trigger the proliferative phase of the uterine cycle. Okay. In addition to the Graafian follicle releasing estrogen, we also see the Graafian follicle releasing inhibin. And here, let's make the target be the adenohypophysis. And we see that this is going to inhibit the production of FSH. And so this is how we get a winner. So once you get that one follicle crossing the finish line, as it were, becoming the Graafian, it releases inhibin, and that effectively stops the race. All of those other follicles that are tertiary follicles are just going to degrade. Okay. We see that the luteinizing hormone, or LH, is released by the adenohypophysis. And we can say here it's going to target let's go ahead and say it's going to target the Graafian follicle. And what we're going to see with the spike in LH, this is going to result in ovulation. Ovulation means secondary oocyte is going to be actually released. It's going to rupture through the graphium follicle and rupture through the side of the ovarian wall. And so we see, remember that the fallopian tube or uterine tube is sort of wrapped around the ovary, but it's not a continuous connection. And you have the fimbriae or finger-like connections of the uterine tube helping to sweep that secondary oocyte into the uterine tube. Remember also at ovulation, the graphian follicle becomes the corpus luteum. So we're going to see the corpus luteum releasing remember yellow body. Corpus luteum is releasing the progesterone. The progesterone, let's say, also has some widespread targets, but I think primarily we're going to see it in the secretory phase or triggering the secretory phase of the uterine cycle. We'll see it like maintain that early pregnancy. Okay. And so maybe for target tissue, let's say uterus. Alrighty. And then the last one to mention here is the oxytocin. So oxytocin is released by the neurohypophysis. Its target tissue is the myoepithelial cells in the lactiferous sinuses and ducts. And then we say it's going to trigger the release of milk. If you want to, you can also add the myometrium, which is a smooth muscle layer of the uterus. And so we'll also see it involved in uterine contractions. And in terms of a person who is nursing their infant, this will be important because you're postpartum, and this will help return that uterus back to that pre-pregnancy size and re-establish that muscle tone and just really increase the health of the uterus. All right, y'all, this is it. We are done. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.